Ohio State is coming off a national championship victory. Winning back-to-back national championships in college football in this age is wildly difficult. I know we just saw it, with Georgia, 2021, 2022, but you have to think about this. Like, your coaching staffs are getting poached. Your best players are off to the NFL. Chances are you are losing double-digit players to the NFL. It is wildly difficult, especially with that giant target on your back, because you're already Ohio State as it is. You already have a target on your back. You're at a conference game. Your big premier one is against Texas, who's the odds-on favorite along with you to win the national championship. I think it'll be pretty tough to replicate, but there's still a ton of talent littered on this team. If you remember last year, injuries on the offensive line, guys had to step up. Those guys are back. A lot of them playing. You had to step up at the wide receiver spot. True freshman Jeremiah Smith absolutely being a baller. On the defensive side, Caleb Downs, who was a sophomore last year. So you were still looking at a really solid roster, but losing 14 guys to the NFL, plus Josh Fire, plus Seth McLaughlin, plus G. Scott. It's going to be an interesting year for Ohio State, trying to replace all that. Not to mention Jim Knowles leaving for Penn State as your defense coordinator. Chip Kelly gone to the NFL. And Brian Hartline just, giving the keys back. Maybe he just needed a year to figure that out. And then Matt Patricia's the defensive coordinator. There's question marks here. And I know that this is a popular pick to win the national championship. Julian Sayin officially gets that starting job at the quarterback spot. We'll see. Cindy, how are you feeling about this team? Over win total at 10.5. Juice to the under.
Question marks. 14 draft picks. You have another 3 guys that were pretty solid contributors. And Seth McLaughlin, I know he was hurt, but then Josh Fryer, G. Scott, guys that signed undrafted free agent, contracts with NFL teams. 17 guys. I know Ohio State recruits at an elite level. I know that they're the best in the business and all that stuff. And the standard is the standard and all that kind of stuff. You're going to have a hard time convincing me that there's not going to be a drop-off at just about every position. Maybe not tight end. Maybe not offensive line at the end of the year. Maybe we'll see how it works, but you got new coordinators. You got new offensive line coach. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of changes, and it don't get easy. There's no ease into the season. It's Texas right away. And here's the problem. The standard at Ohio State is astronomically high, right? If those guys, this roster who is brand new together and a lot of guys that haven't been playing football isn't ready right away, you could get exposed by Texas. That's how good that Texas roster is, right? Number 1 team in the country. There's a reason why they're number 1. We've done a preview on them. Go check that out if you're curious how we feel about them this year. But it could be whoa. It's going to be a different feel, I think, this year, potentially for Ohio State if they don't come together and gel. It's going to be a lot of projecting going up and down this roster. Obviously, it's fun because you see 4-star and 5-star and recruiting battle here. It's oh wow, this is why you go in the trenches and go down south and get some real good playmakers for you on both sides of the ball. And obviously, they've done a great job supplementing that, and they've supplemented the portal a little bit here and there. But it's going to be interesting to see. Yeah, maybe we do have a step down here in terms of overall talent-wise in every single room. Maybe not talent-wise. Step down of just pure experience and playing style and all that things. That's just mattered. This team was together for 3 years essentially. We kept talking about a lot of the core of this group for so long, and now they're gone. And so how is Ohio State? What's the identity of this 2025 team going to be? Will be interesting to find out.
And before you click off this video as an Ohio State fan and say that we're talking terrible about Ohio State, this is a different scale, all right, that we're grading Ohio State on. We were talking about this time last year, we said that this is the most talented team in the country. Later in the season, we're yeah, there's probably good value to get Ohio State to win the national championship, of course, after they lose to Michigan. And yeah, so here we are talking about a team that is still insanely talented will probably be a top 5 team in the country when it's all said and done at the end of the year. It's just like the question of winning the national championship comes up with teams like this, and that's the question, that we have to answer today. Which, may not be fair to Ohio State, but I'm sure you Ohio State fans, like, that's the expectation, year over year, is to be competing for the national championship. That should be the expectation when you have rosters and a coaching staff and a history and success like you have had at Ohio State. So let's just dive into it. And the offense, Julian Sayin, going to be the quarterback. 5-star kid. We'll see. I will say this. Will Howard getting the hate that he did last year was preposterous. Preposterous. All right. We said it time after time after time that Will Howard, I mean, how many teams in college football would have taken Will Howard last year as their starting quarterback? I'm willing to bet like over 115 of them probably would have taken Will Howard, at least. All right. And yeah, he was good enough to win a national championship, and he did. And he played like an absolute baller down the stretch, right? It was really the Michigan game where he was fighting for his life that really he kind of struggled there down the stretch. But like I'm assuming that this is a downgrade. Ohio State fans, I'm sure some of you can feel differently a little bit. I'm sure that there'll be other Big Ten fans that feel differently, that Julian Sayin is the truth, the light and the way. I think that he is good. And I think he will be really good because he's going to be put in a very favorable system. But let's just slow down for just a second here, right? When you're talking about meeting expectations in terms of your win total, week 1, you're playing Texas, all right? I know you get it at home, and I know Arch Manning is also going to be his first full season as a starter as well. But I'm assuming that Texas is going to have a quarterback edge in that game. Maybe at the end of the year, that's not what we're saying. But for right now, here we are, August 22nd, as we're recording this. That's what I'm going to say. And then I don't feel great about the rest of that room for 2025. I mean, I think Taven St. Clair's really good. I think that he'll be a solid player for you down the road. Is he ready to go right now? I don't know necessarily. Is Eli brick and mortar over there? Right? Is Keinholz? I mean, we've seen Keinholz play. I don't love that if he has to end up playing significant snaps for you. Because if you remember, Aaron Nolan also, ended up going to South Carolina. So I am Devin Brown, who ended up going to went up getting beat out, by the way. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think after Julian Sayin, I think it's a pretty significant drop-off here. So you're hoping that Sayin stays healthy, although he did have to battle for this job. But if he's not significantly better, I think, than Keinholz, then I think you might have a problem here at quarterback.
Yeah, I think what gives you hope as a fan in terms of your depth in this room was that Keinholz did battle Sayin as long as he did. On the flip side, like, you wanted to see Sayin come out in fall camp and really take that job, and that's like the upside of your team, along with a couple of the positions we'll talk about in terms of some question marks, but with a lot of talent. And obviously, Sayin has all the talent in the world. Keinholz is also a super fun guy, a guy I've followed for a while in his recruitment leading back all the way to South Carolina, right, and what he did there. But yeah, with Sayin, I think you wanted to see him win that job a little bit easier and earlier than he did. Obviously, who knows, right? So it could have been a lot.
Could have been a lot of factors.
So I'm not too worried about that. But it is also interesting. Like, you have to talk about new scheme and new development. Obviously, when you're throwing to these playmakers, and honestly, behind a pretty solid offensive line, it's going to be like, again, we're grading on a different scale with this team. We are expecting elite, above average to elite quarterback play from Ohio State's quarterback. And is it fair to expect that out of a redshirt freshman? I mean, yeah, he's a 5-star kid, one of the top guys in this class. So obviously, yes, like that's part of it. Huge get, by the way, that you got him from Alabama. Like, this would be a much different quarterback room I think we'd be talking about if you didn't get Sayin, if Nick Saban didn't retire, right, and Julian Sayin was an Alabama Crimson Tide on that roster, and all of a sudden you're looking to maybe the portal or other spots to fill this hole. So good work by Day in backfilling that you didn't need. Sayin, it wasn't a need in last offseason, but boy, was that a big time get for you. And good stuff. I mean, he's always he knows what he's doing, right? I think he's earned the trust, hopefully, of Ohio State fans as well as everyone around the country. That yeah, he knows what he's doing.
At running back, I mean, you lose the best running back duo in the entire country, Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. James Peoples played last year. Solid running back. Whether he's like that go-to guy that's getting most of the carries, and CJ Donaldson from West Virginia, who's kind of a beast on his own. That was a pretty good get. Sneaky. Like every time I look at this Ohio State roster, I forget that CJ Donaldson is on the Ohio State Buckeyes. And to be honest, I like that a lot. Definitely get a sort of thunder and lightning here like they had at West Virginia, with CJ Donaldson and Jaheim White. And I think both of those players benefited from that. So I think this will be good, right? And then you also got some young guys as well that could definitely spell Peoples and Donaldson in situations. But yeah, it's going to be a downgrade. But I'm not selling on this wide receiver room, this running back room.
No, absolutely not. Donaldson's a great pickup for you. Obviously, Peoples, has the upside to be the next in a line of elite running backs that has come out of Ohio State. Yeah, but you're going to miss these two guys that were two early second-round picks that were so good for you, that kept you healthy all throughout, along with James Peoples, what he gave you in your running back room. Bo Jackson's a guy I'll mention as well. First of all, great name for a running back. Secondly, a true freshman coming in out of the Midwest, coming out of in-state Ohio, right? A guy that's pretty darn impactful. I think we could see him come in and ready to contribute. 6 foot, 215 to 20, depending on where he's playing at right now. A guy that I think definitely will be a part of this packages, especially early in the season outside of Texas, right? If you're looking at your schedule, like you're going to have Grambling, Ohio, even Minnesota early in the year. Like you're going to have opportunities to get some guys, some good quality reps. Bo Jackson will be a guy I think will very well flash early in September.
Yeah. And then in the wide receiver room, losing Egbuka, I mean, I think people forget about him. People don't forget about him, right? If you're a football fan, you know who he is because you've been following, NFL training camp news and Chris Godwin injury status and Jalen McMillan injury status, right? But yeah, Egbuka, all-time receptions leader at Ohio State, like that's kind of nuts. And I guess that's more of a testament to him staying all 4 years that he was there and just being effective all those years. So Jeremiah Smith obviously is back. He is a stud. Cornell Tate, Chicago native, stud. Brandon Inniss, stud. All right. Miles Graham can also be a stud. This room is still loaded, right? I think Egbuka is a kind of a big loss because he was that sort of veteran presence, but Cornell Tate and Jeremiah Smith both had over 50 receptions last year. Jeremiah Smith is obviously he's the best wide receiver in football. I mean,
best player probably in football. If he's not the best player in football, Caleb Downs is. Like, it's a good problem to have for Ohio State.
Yeah, it is a good problem to have. So, I mean, it depends what kind of jump you think Jeremiah Smith can make. I don't know how much more of a jump that he can make, right? Like Cornell Tate maybe can make a jump here. Brandon Inniss as well. So if those guys end up being as good as Egbuka, then this wide receiver room won't be taking a drop off at all. But it doesn't matter, I guess, when you have Jeremiah Smith, as long as he's healthy and playing, and he's kind of built like a brick. So players, CD, when you look at them, you're like, oh, that guy's durable. You just look at Jeremiah Smith and you're like, yeah, that guy's durable. I hope I don't bite my tongue there. But yeah, I think it's another insanely talented group, so I'm not worried about these guys.
Yeah, the one thing I will say, you would see a massive drop off. Obviously, if Jeremiah Smith is not playing, this team gets a lot worse, and that's not a shot at Miles Graham or Quincy Porter or whoever else we put in that third wide receiver role, but it's just the reality of what it is. And also, too, I'm glad you brought up Egbuka. He was the first overall pick out of any of the players last year, the first Ohio State Buckeye taken in the 2025 NFL draft. Of all those freak talents, of all those guys that played so good for so long at Ohio State, Egbuka was who the NFL thought was the most worthy of an NFL draft pick. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean everything in terms of whatever, in terms of how you were as a college production and all that kind of stuff. I get that, but I think that's pretty telling on like how good he was. Like before, we just be like, oh, we'll be fine, which you probably will, and this is a room I'm not worried about. But I think just appreciate, yeah, what Ibuka did for you, and that maybe you do see some lumps, and that, yeah, like obviously replacing Ibuka with Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis is about as good as it gets, right? But um, it's just before, just remember that, right? And obviously, like those guys, they're not young, but there's not like a 24 or 22, 23-year-old kid in that room. So it's a lot of young guys, like guys that have been kind of growing up together, which is a lot of fun. And for fans, you get that, salivate over, oh my God, we could have these guys for a couple years, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's so exciting. But yeah, this room is probably the best in the country. I'm not trying to, but I'm trying to just bring some context to it as well.
Tight end room. Max Clare. I think it's an upgrade over G. Scott. I mean, G. Scott was really good, and I think he was vastly underrated because the ball wasn't moving around to him necessarily, because there were other guys that like, hey, we're going to try to put the ball in Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins and Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Emeka Egbuka's hands. Not necessarily G. Scott, but he was pretty serviceable. He was good. He was a good tight end. But Max Clare coming over from Purdue, I think is a different animal. I think he's going to be one of, if not the best, tight end possibly in college football from a offensive receiving production standpoint.
Yeah, and not only him, obviously, you know what he can do coming over from Purdue was the headliner of transfer portal class they brought in. But Will Kakmarak, right? He's coming back. Bennett Christian, Johnny Thurman, like the list goes on and on. You have versatility, you've got depth in that room, which is a lot of fun. I'm excited to see true freshman Nate Roberts, and like how much. Obviously, tight end 5, like, is not going to be playing a ton of football for you, and necessarily like a game changing, important piece, but like he's ready to play, I think, and obviously that's just awesome. The more and more bodies you have in a tight end room that can give you looks and give you things, keep you fresh. Whoever's on right there or in that week of practice deserves the reps. Like, I think it's a lot of fun. Like what Hartman can do, or what Brian Hartline can do with this, and Ryan Day also can do with this room. I think is like really, really exciting. Paired with obviously one of the best wide receiver, or if not the best wide receiver core in the country, is pretty dangerous for opponent. Like I do not envy defensive coordinators. I do not envy Johnny Nansen and Pete Kwiatkowski over in Texas to try to figure out what to do with this these weapons this year.
The offensive line. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about the offensive line this year. You were injured last year late, and you had huge contributions from Luke Montgomery and Sarivold, and Carson Hinsman, ended up being a dude down the stretch. Well, I mean, he ended up playing center down the stretch. We'll say that. But having experience, and then you still won a national championship with those guys, right? So you lose Donovan Jackson, you lose Josh Fryer, you lose Josh Simmons, you lose Seth McLaughlin. But you brought in, Phillip Daniels, who looks really good, and will potentially be playing that right tackle spot. Luke Montgomery, you're anticipating being one of the better guys on this offensive line. Hinsman will be back playing center, who played snaps for you last year down the stretch in the biggest games of the year. To Shbola, and then also like that left tackle spot, though, interesting, right? Because, well, it's interesting. I really thought the Rice guy that they brought in was a dude. Onyanwa. Thought he was a dude. But if you were shopping for more tackles, again in the spring, what does that tell you, right? About how they feel about that position, or even the depth at that position. So, CD, what are your thoughts on this offensive line? Like, as much experience and for how many guys you lose on the top end, right? You're still getting back some of these guys from that late run last year. So it's weird.
For a group that replaces 4 guys, it's not fair, right? It's absolutely a very talented room. I think the depth in terms of like 5 through 10 are also solid too. and something that the coaching staff is fine on. I think in terms of this being an elite team, elite roster, an elite offensive line, yeah, like I would have loved to see and heard a bunch of buzz about Ethan Onianwa, and that could still happen, right? It's still August. We're recording this August 22nd. Like this, you could still see, things change quickly here. He could try it out against Texas and have a hell of a day against Colin Simmons, and here we are, just like, holy cow, what a great offensive line this is going to be. But yeah, you talked about like guys that got key reps last year in massive spots. Hinsman also played a ton in 2023, right? If you remember that. So former big time recruit, he's finally put on some weight too, like playing. I remember we talked about him being undersized a couple years ago, which is crazy at Ohio State having an undersized offensive line. But yeah, it's a solid group. And I'll say this too about Philip Daniels. Like I've watched him pretty closely at Minnesota. The guy can move, man. He's a really good athlete. He has everything. When he puts it together, it is a work of art there at right tackle. So I'm excited for him because he struggled right in spring camp. He was like running with the threes essentially, and that's where I think you were also kind of shopping for tackle help there because you were we whiffed on him and Onianwa too. Like obviously didn't take that job that you wanted him to take at left tackle. So that's I think part of that too. As you go on forward, I think Daniel's looking more and more comfortable, which is awesome because he's really special. And he's going to be a guy that if I look around on this offensive line here, I mean, we'll see about Sareveld, right? A left tackle, and obviously Onyanwa could be a guy like if he just pops off, he could skyrocket in the NFL draft market. But I look at Phil Daniels, I'm like, yeah, that guy could be a top 60 pick. Absolutely. And you guys know a thing or two about pumping out top 60 offensive linemen. So yeah, for a group that loses 2 first-round picks and 2 other big-time contributors, it's going to be new, and we'll see about the tackles. I think that's still a question mark in terms of like the Ohio State standard, but we'll learn pretty quickly about Texas. And dude, the other thing is you could lose to Texas. I know, cover your ears, Ohio State fans. You could lose to Texas and still be very fine and accomplish all of your goals and like figure things out. You don't have to be a national championship team August 30th, right? Things will take time potentially to replace them. I'm not doom and gloom here about this room. It's just going to be a downgrade. And like how much of a downgrade I think depends on probably the ceiling of this team too, outside of obviously the quarterback position.
And on the defense side of the ball, I think you probably, and we don't know this, get a downgrade at the defensive coordinator spot, right? Even though Matt Patricia is a seasoned coach on his own, like, and that was a pretty decent hire. How will it translate to college, right? I think he'll be fine. I do think Jim Knowles, though, was so underappreciated, and it was so obvious because he went and took another job because he was underappreciated, right? And won a national championship with the best defense in the country by the end of the year. In the front seven, you lose lots of guys. All right, you lose 4 all Big Ten guys. Not to mention Ty Hamilton, you also lose as well. I mean, it's Tyleik Williams, you lose JT Tuimoloau, Cody Simon, Jack Sawyer, Ty Hamilton in that front seven. That's significant. Here's the thing, though. You are still wildly talented in this group, right? On defensive line, you also bring in Bo Atkinson as well, who is a stud, right, getting to the quarterback. Caden McDonald, right? Is he going to be a guy that ends up playing significant amount this year? I mean, he will, right? He will. And he'll probably be a significant role on this defense. I mean, he played a solid amount of snaps. It's just like Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams both played over 580 snaps as interior defensive linemen, right? And then the next guy up was Caden McDonald, so in that rotation, who played a little over 200. So he's just going to have to take that step. Can he? I think he absolutely can. Kenyatta Jackson, dude. I feel like we've been talking about him for like the last 3 years. He just looks insane. Like he looks like an absolute monster. And I think he can be, dude. Like this is a guy I think that's going to shoot up draft boards this year. I think this is a guy that's could potentially lead the team in sacks. That's just going to be an absolute monster. It's like you're playing behind JT Tuimoloau though and Jack Sawyer. Like that's who you were playing behind. He still found a way to get 300 snaps out there on the field, 17 pressures, and just 186, pass rushing snaps, right? So, which is good, right? Which is good. But, I mean, just for Tyreek Williams, had only 20 pressures on twice the amount of pass rushing attempts, right? It's different, though, coming from the interior, but like Derek Harmon, who went out there in the first round of 55, like that's nuts. So I think there's levels to this. I think that Kenyatta Jackson, though, is kind of a freak and a guy that's a giant breakout candidate on this defensive line, among some other players as well.
Yeah, I mean, how many teams can lose 4 guys to the NFL that all played 600 plus snaps and that were really stinking good and are going to be pretty darn good players in the NFL and might even come back the next year looking more physically impressive? I mean, Edric Houston, Caden McDonald, like Kenyatta Jackson, those guys just looked the part, man. Caden Curry, it seems like he's been also waiting his turn there in that room. Obviously, depth at DT and interior defensive line is going to be important because of obviously Edric Houston. It sounds like he avoided major injury, which is great, but that's not great if you're having some potential soft tissue or whatever kind of injuries, in fall camp, lower body, and like that doesn't necessarily bode well for the regular season, right? In terms of just durability and other things like that. Obviously, hoping he stays healthy because he's a special player, no doubt. That was a huge recruiting win, if you remember that, which I'm sure Ohio State fans do in terms of getting him out of a couple of teams in the SEC. I'm excited to see about CJ Hicks, too, as a guy that's just been such a good athlete on your team and like physically imposing. You're beefing him up a little bit, putting him at defensive end. I think it will be probably an adjustment period, and he don't have to be a star for you, but what can he give you on your team? Can he actually play 250, 300 snaps, and like how effective is he going to be in that? But obviously, you have to have it there with Atkinson and Logan George. So it's an exciting group, and obviously, it'll be fun, I think, for fans. Obviously, like with Sawyer and JTT and Tyreek Williams and Ty Hamilton, even like all those guys did for you for so long. You're gonna miss them, right? But I think it's kind of exciting to get some fresh blood and be like, whoa, holy cow, they were holding these guys back from us. And Ohio State fans know like who's in next. So obviously it's a fun group, but they'll get tested early, right? Just like we keep talking about with Texas and whoever else. But this is a group that has to be pretty damn good because it's college football playoff contender, college football national championship contender. You have to win along the fronts here, and defensive line's no different.
Yeah, and a linebacker. I mean, the only person who played more snaps than Sonny Styles last year was Caleb Downs. Sonny Styles was a dang good football player for you last year. Who else was, though? Cody Simon, right? He was one of the better, middle linebackers in college football. But you're replacing him with Arvell Reese, who's a guy, I mean, last year, Arvell Reese played over 300 snaps. Like, he's not a nobody. He's not, like, just stepping up. And he played pretty well in those spots as well. I think that Cody Simon, losing him, will be a downgrade, but how much, especially at the positional value that linebacker has, it may not be super significant, right? Cody Simon is that level of player and athlete, though, that you normally lose, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's going to be a huge drop-off. That's going to be a significant loss, but I don't know, man. I think Arvell Reese is kind of a dude, and I think they kind of like the talent, at least from a depth perspective. They obviously don't have a lot of experience, coming out here beyond those couple guys, but they might like what they have in this room, despite the inexperience beyond those two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Peyton Pierce, guy I'd throw out there too. That's I think going to play a lot for him. It sounds like Laurinaitis loves him and what he can do. Even early in his career, being a second-year guy, redshirt freshman, coming out of the state of Texas. Another guy, a young kid out of the state of Texas, Riley Pettijohn as well, providing depth for you. So all in all, you lose what I thought was one of the better linebackers in college football. No doubt about that. Cody Simon was so good. And obviously him and Styles and what Reese did supplementing was a lot of fun to watch for you. But obviously you also feel pretty good about the depth of this room. and who's coming up if you can move CJ Hicks down to defensive end, right? So like that to me, yeah, I'm all aboard this room. It's going to be pretty fun to watch. Styles continue to fly around. I mean, he's just such a freak, man. He'll be a lot of fun, and I think they can really like fully unleash him and see what he does. And it's really only year 2 of playing linebacker, right? I mean, they kind of moved him positions, and it went just about as good as you could have asked for in year 1. Comes back year 2 as leader and whatever else, and will be so much fun to watch.
This secondary, though, I don't think it's the best in the country, but you're going to be struggling to find much better secondaries. I mean, you lose Lathan Ransom, right? That's a huge loss, right? He was fantastic, first team All Big Ten, NFL player. Jordan Hancock, obviously leaving as well. But I mean, Caleb Downs, Igbinosun, Jermaine Matthews, Lorenzo Styles. I mean, this is a good secondary. I mean, what are your thoughts on this group here? And do you think we can see a step taken from any of these guys? And are there guys on this depth that you would feel good about, coming in for some of these guys at the top?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't go out and get anyone in the portal, and they could have. It's Ohio State, right? So if they wanted to, they obviously felt good about their internal replacements for these guys. Yeah, obviously, you're going to see Lorenzo Styles and Jalen McClain kind of step into bigger roles. Malik Hartford will be a guy that you can be versatile with as well. We'll be interested to see about the true freshman, Devin Sanchez. Obviously, you hope he don't play a ton. You hope he doesn't need it, right? But the fact that he just looks the part and is going to be a really, really good player one day for you, it's more of a luxury in that room as your third or fourth cornerback. But yeah, if that's what you have behind one of the better cornerback duos in America, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, obviously Igbinosun, excited to see him. He could have gone to the NFL. I do think it was probably a great idea to stay back for a year, continue to put on good film and get better, and maximize your potential future earnings in the NFL at Ohio State. And they do such a good job developing guys anyways. And paired with Caleb Downs and with Jermaine Matthews coming back too, who really came on to his own at the end of last year and is, kind of phased out, a pretty darn good corner as well in Denzel Burke. So yeah, the upside in this room is tremendously high. The floor is tremendously high. This should be one of the best groups in America. Probably the strength of this defense, I think. And then, see what you get from that front seven, just because you are replacing a little bit more people up there. So, yeah, for a group that loses 2 NFL players, yeah, you got to feel pretty good about what it looks like right now in 2025.
Yeah, although definitely like Brian Hartline going back to be the offensive coordinator, Matt Patricia being the new defensive coordinator, Tyler Bowen coming in as your offensive line coach, who, I think there's potentially better offensive line coaches out there, but we'll see. I mean, just like major shakeup in that staff, from both coordinators. Brian Hartline obviously he's going to get another chance here, right, to take over the offense, and we'll see if he does. But Chip Kelly obviously had a huge impact. Jim Knowles obviously had a huge impact, from play calling perspective on both sides there. So losing those guys, I think, is a big deal, and I think you have to factor that to some degree. But replacing Jim Knowles with Matt Patricia's, pretty nice, and then also staying in house and keeping your offense the way that it was, or at least attempt to. Although Chip Kelly is kind of a special play caller, I think people forget that Chip Kelly is actually pretty solid at that. So interesting stuff. Special teams, I mean, it's pretty much going to stay the same, right? I mean, same guys, same staff members. We don't really need to dive into that, but it'll be fine, right? So for the schedule and trying to get to 10.5 wins, I have a tough time getting like to 11. you know? And that doesn't mean like, oh gosh, Ohio State, they stink. I mean, they won 10 games last year and won the national championship. All right. So let's relax here, right? I think Texas is going to be tough. I do like Texas's roster a little bit. Like I have less question marks, I think, about their roster. So you get them at home, though. That's a big deal. Michigan, you're going on the road. I think they'll be better than they were last year. Not necessarily defensively, but you never know in that game. Uh, Illinois, you got to go on the road to Penn State. Thankfully, you host them, but like this is that year for Penn State, like that they got a real chance to get you. So that's 4 games, and also Washington going on the road there. I don't want you guys to sleep on Washington either, right? That's a pretty darn good football team as well. So if Julian Sand, is not what he if Julian Sand is not playing at the Will Howard level, right, and that offensive line doesn't take that jump that you think it's going to take, or at least the players in the offensive line, not necessarily the offensive line, but we talked about that offensive line, and then that front seven, right? If they're getting to the quarterback, stopping the run, like we know that they can, and Matt Patricia's doing a good job with those boys. Sure, they can absolutely they go undefeated with this schedule. Getting Penn State at home, and Penn State and Texas at home, like that's what kind of gives you this undefeated season ceiling, right? But I don't know. I'll lean to the under. It is juicy under. Obviously, not a bet for me. There's no way you could convince me to bet Ohio State to win less than 10.5 games. But if you were forcing me to, I guess I would lean that direction.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to echo a lot of that too. That at Washington game is one that I circled early on looking at the schedule. The good news is you do have a bye week before that. You also have a bye week before Penn State. That's the one thing is I look at the schedule and I like, yes, you get them at home, right? But I see Texas and I see Penn State, and dare I say, like I think they have a better roster than Ohio State, which is crazy. I think it speaks more to what they've done with Texas and Penn State than your roster. I think the upside of Ohio State's roster is higher than Penn State's. Like if this thing comes together, you could see November 1st like happen, and Penn State could like narrowly squeak out a victory, and you just see some things that like, oh look, it's coming together. The lights coming on for Julian Sayin. The O-line's coming together. Kenyatta Jackson stepping into his zone and starting to be a one-man wrecking crew on that front four. But yeah, so that's where I think this. I mean, last year you had how many seniors, and yeah, you could tell me that they coasted in the regular season, blah blah blah, like whatever. But like, it took until game 13 for it to pop, and when it did, obviously you couldn't let it back in, and it was outrageous what they were doing to teams. I also like Texas too. They're gonna be out for blood. Last year, like I think if you ask Texas, they felt like they absolutely could have won that game. I know it ended up being a little bit like 2 scores, whatever it ended up being, but they were right in there. If you remember that before Jack Sawyer, made that one of the most famous plays in Ohio State football history. So yeah, it's a lot of fun on the schedule. Also, too, the little stretch here at Illinois, October 11th, at Wisconsin, back-to-back weeks before into your bye week. So at the end of a 4-game stretch for you. And then obviously a little look ahead to Penn State in a couple weeks. Not that Wisconsin scares you as a roster, but that's typically been a tough place to play in the Big Ten. And then obviously at Illinois, like I think Illinois is a pretty darn good roster. Obviously, Ohio State should be able to play their B minus game and probably get a win in Illinois just because of how good their team is. But yeah, it's definitely like something where I will say too, where I'm not leaning the over here is not only I think in more, not to ramble on, but in more often than not, I think you're probably splitting 1-1 versus Texas and Penn State. Like those are the two glaring, obvious big games for you. I didn't talk about Michigan. Like I had to believe you're going to beat Michigan, right? Like you can't do it another year, right? Like that's going to happen. I'm just kind of projecting that in right now, but I don't think this team. I think this team can bottom out to where, like, with so many new faces, so many more younger guys playing, even though the talent's there, like where you could drop a game that you shouldn't, right? And that's some of the worry too that I think we're like kind of pushing me away from hitting that over. Obviously, not the video Ohio State fans wanted to hear coming in after a national championship. I think it's a little realistic, though. Obviously, you and I both feel they can win a title again, but like to play a lot of good football for all year long and then make it there and have to play clean football for 4 weeks or 4 games in a row probably is really, really hard. And that team was so special, so talented last year that I hope you don't take for granted like how hard that actually was and how close to it came to not happening. Like you got into the playoffs after losing to Michigan and losing to Oregon. And yeah, it's obviously a hell of a year last year, but it'll be exciting to watch this team. New faces, 5 stars all over the roster, a lot of talent, athleticism, new coaches. A lot more question marks I think we had this time last year, but the potential's there, no doubt, for Ohio State.